I've been threatened a lot in my life.
It's such a strange dystopian world that we're living in.
If we get to a place where the Trump administration will no longer follow clear directives from the Supreme Court, we are totally screwed. How much warning does the American public need? You knew this was going to happen.
Hi, everybody, and welcome into the Sanity Podcast. Dave Briggs and Allison Camerata, two of the only people on the planet that have successfully anchored at both Fox News and CNN. So therefore, we think we have an interesting perspective on today's blockbuster guest, who is former FBI Director and author James Comey. He is now being investigated by the Secret Service, and he is taking heat from the entire right side of the aisle over a social media post. And Allison, I think what's interesting about Comey in this day and age, he might be the one figure I know that is hated equally on both sides, by the right for triggering the Russia investigation, by the left for some say ushering in the Trump era with the Hillary investigation right before the election.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats have obviously never forgiven him for what happened in the weeks before the 2016 election with announcing that there was yet another chapter in the Hillary emails. So yeah, I'm sure it's not comfortable to be James Comey. And in fact, in our conversation, we get into if he would do anything, what he would do differently in 2016 if he could go back in time. But particularly today, things are uncomfortable.
We also asked Comey what he would say to Hillary Clinton. They've never met if they had a drink. We did not get to ask him about this controversy. Our interview was before the controversial social media post. It was about this book. So he posts on Instagram on his morning beach walk a shell formation, 8647, a perfect shell formation, and says, "Cool shell formation on my beach walk." Well, I did not know what that meant. I saw that post in real time.
And
if you saw that.
But hold on. So you saw it and you just thought, what did you think? You just glanced at it and what did you think?
I too thought cool shell formation. Maybe I'm naive and I don't spend a lot of time on the divisive corners of the internet. So I literally thought cool shell formation.
Right. You didn't parse it for a deeper
What
meaning.
would you think if you saw that?
I wouldn't think anything, but
okay.
I wouldn't think anything just by seeing it like that. I too would dismiss it. But I know the term 86. I know the term 86 very well because I've worked in lots of restaurants.
As have I.
So it's restaurant talk. It's restaurant talk for like, we're out of mussels. 86 the mussels, like we're done. 86 the special, we're out of it now.
86 the filet, 86 the lobster. I worked in a lot of restaurants too. That's where my head goes.
It means we're done. We're done with it. So what he was saying is, let's be done with 47, meaning Trump, the 47th president.
He knew it was political, which I didn't. So he at least knew it was pertained to the 47th president, Donald Trump.
You thought it was pretty shelf
I did. I'm a tad naive. But he knew it was political, and presumably he thought that meant remove him from office by legal means, impeach him, which in my estimation is what that means in the first place. But of course, almost everyone on the right says this was an assassination call from Comey. He took down the post and he put up this statement. I posted earlier a picture of some shells I saw on a beach walk, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down.
Okay.
Being that this book really dives into extremist violence on the right generated by online content and podcast, I don't think there's any chance this grandfather now and former FBI director wanted to call for the assassination of President Trump.
Of course not. The former FBI director would never call for the assassination of Donald Trump. That's just hyperbole. That's just I think the right wing trying to drum something up. But I know they are. So go ahead. What have they said?
Well, we did talk to James shortly ahead about Kash Patel. He has some very interesting things to say. The current FBI director said, "We are aware of the recent social media post. We are in communication with the Secret Service, and director primary stiction is with the Secret Service." But we go on and get much more serious from there. Kristi Noem says disgraced former FBI Director James Comey just called for the assassination of President Trump. Your thoughts?
That's not true. That's silly. 86 means something. I mean, again, it's restaurant talk. But what I think is most hypocritical is that Donald Trump is known for having used lots of violent rhetoric. So the double standard, I understand if people really want to interpret this in the most violent way, well, then you have to also look at what Donald Trump has said and the violent rhetoric that he has used. You can't dismiss that and focus in on just this.
I do know he was under fire once about a year ago for posting a video of a pickup truck driving down the street with Trump signs showing a picture of a kidnapped and tied up Joe Biden.
Okay, that I would say is more violent. I have more. Yeah, remember when he said about Liz Cheney, let's see how she feels when guns are trained on her face.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face.
That's explicit. That's much more explicit. Do you remember when a heckler, this is back in 2015, I remember it vividly, when he was running for office and a heckler heckled him at one of his big, campaign rallies. And he said that heckler should be roughed up. He said, if you see somebody ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, just knock the hell out of him. I mean, these are explicit calls for violence.
Yeah, so he's probably not the right messenger to attack what James Comey
Well, for sure,
posted.
but I'm just saying, like, let's stay consistent, folks. So if Chrissy Noem was upset about what James Comey did, fine. I hope she's very upset about these things.
Well, then in that light, if you're going to spend years criticizing Hunter Biden, you probably should criticize President Trump for taking hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars from a crypto scheme and a $400 million plane from Qatar to support
you're
Hamas.
upping the double standard.
I guess a little bit.
I see what you're doing.
Sorry about that. Donald Trump Jr. Put on Twitter, James Comey casually called for my dad to be murdered. This is who the Dem media worships. And by the way, the Dem media doesn't worship James Comey. I think they really criticize him for his handling of the 2016 election. Taking this to another level was Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence.
Whatever James Comey intent, he and people like him need to be held to account according to the law, which is something that he claims to have given his life for and stands by the rule of law. Fantastic. The rule of law says people like him who issue direct threats against the President of the United States, essentially issuing a call to assassinate him, must be held accountable under the law.
Do you believe Comey should be in jail?
I do. Any other person with the position of influence that he has, people who take very seriously what a guy of his stature, his experience, and what the propaganda media has built him up to be, I'm very concerned for the president's life. We've already seen assassination attempts. I'm very concerned for his life. And James Comey, in my view, should be held accountable and put behind bars for this.
Okay, then, Tulsi Gabbard, do you feel the same way?
Comey should be in jail.
Great. I hope she feels the same way about Donald Trump and the violent things that he said. I just don't take it seriously when they were silent on things that were explicit calls for violence.
Well, I know Jim well. I've met him. I've had a drink with him. The timing could not be worse. He wants the focus to be on this book, FDR Drive, which is the third in his fiction series. It is a real terrific read. It is not going away if you turn on Fox News and any media on the right. It's going to be a really tough couple of days. And as an author, you must relate how difficult this timing would be.
It is difficult timing. So either it can drum up sales or it can have you canceled. And so in this case, I don't see how it drums up sales because there's a lot of Republicans that buy fiction and thrillers like this. So I don't think that it will be helpful. But let's hear what he has to say.
Jim Comey, great to have you in, sir. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great. It's great to be with both of you.
Great to have you.
You too. So we like to start the show with a little icebreaker. And Dave likes to ask people what they're drinking, but I find that to sometimes be a little exclusive.
Let me clarify.
Some people don't drink.
Well, I've had a margarita with this man,
Okay,
so I know he enjoys a good cocktail.
So here's your choice. What are you drinking or what are you streaming?
Oh, well, streaming's probably easier because my wife and I are in the middle of a BritBox series called Protection that is about witness protection in the UK. So we have 2 episodes to go. We love watching, especially the British mystery shows together.
Yep, people love BritBox.
People love the BritBox. What's the deal with BritBox? Is it just a different pace than American shows?
Yeah, the Brits are smarter than we are, so the stories are a little bit more subtle and complicated, and yeah, so they're a little bit more of a brain tease. We just finished we just finished Ludwig, which is a really interesting BritBox show that is about a puzzle master who becomes accidentally a police detective, and so it's pretty. I wouldn't say it's highbrow because I'm not highbrow, but it's a little more complicated and sophisticated than a lot of the stuff we have on U.S. TV.
Well, generally speaking, I think BritBox is highbrow because, like, yeah, I'm too impatient. Like, I need
You need action?
Well, I need the pace of American television. You really have to be a patient and I think more intellectual consumer than I am, and I acknowledge
What I'm struck by with Jim is like you clearly are enjoying art imitating life, or I mean, you still like you write about the intrigue and legal thrillers. You watch that streaming in terms of police intrigue, and you've lived it. So that genre seems to suit you.
Yeah, except I've come to it late in life. I never could during my career. So we're thinking 30 years. I couldn't watch or read crime or espionage or terrorism because it was filling my days. And so now I guess I'm making up for a lost time. And it's a fun thing now that I'm an old fuddy-duddy. It's a fun thing to do with my spouse. That's what I do for fun. I watch TV and look at birds.
I get it.
Can't wait to dive into FDR Drive. How was it making that career pivot, relatively speaking, late in life, and how refreshing was that for you?
It was hard because I was a knucklehead. I resisted it at first. I somehow thought that writing fiction, when my agent and editors wanted me to try, I thought it was somehow beneath me, which was idiotic. But once I tried it, it was both sort of nostalgia for me to be able to go back into the worlds I've known, and a ton of fun to show people these worlds that I've known. And I didn't realize, as part of my being a moron about it, I didn't realize that fiction would give me so much more freedom to show people worlds in a real way, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. It does give you freedom because you can put something behind the veil. You know, I wrote a sort of thinly veiled novel a few years ago, and it gives you freedom because people don't know exactly what's real and what's not real. So I get that. And so let's talk about your book. So this is the third in a series of legal thrillers. It's called FDR Drive. So give us the thumbnail. What's it about?
It's about a right-wing demagogue podcaster in Manhattan whose words are moving followers to violence against his targets around the country. And it's about the protagonist, Nora Carlton, and her team trying to figure out how to hold him accountable for that, to walk that line between protected speech and crime and try to hold this guy who's a bad dude accountable. And it's complicated and twisty, which makes for, I think, a fun book.
How closely, yeah, no doubt timely. How closely does Nora Carlton kind of mirror your career?
Sort of. I mean, she's been to places that I was. In the last book, she was the top lawyer at a big hedge fund in the sparkling jewel that is Westport, Connecticut. And that's something I did. And she's now a senior person at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan, which I also was. But she's wrestling with things that I wrestled with in government, especially as FBI director, this incredible ability of the internet to whisper in the ear of people who are troubled and seeking meaning, to move them towards acts of violence. We grapple with that a lot in different contexts. And so it's kind of a combination of a lot of things I did, but it's also when I write about her, thank God I don't picture me. I picture my children, especially my oldest daughter, who's a federal prosecutor in Manhattan. And that unlocked something for me. I struggled at first because my protagonist was going to be a mini me. And that was kind of icky. And then once I got away from that and had this protagonist that is literally someone that I love, a combination of my kids, it became really a joy for me.
That's so nice. And your daughter is not just any prosecutor, we should mention. She's involved in hugely high-profile cases right now, the Sean Diddy Combs case.
Right. She's the lead prosecutor on that case. She was the chief of public corruption when they indicted Senator Menendez from New Jersey. She prosecuted Jeffrey Epstein until he killed himself. And then she tried, again, as the lead, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Jeffrey Epstein's partner in abusing young girls. She's an incredible talent and an incredible person. And her passion is working with victims of sex trafficking and sex crimes, which is incredibly hard work, but there's nobody who does it better.
Can't imagine how proud you are. So I mentioned the main character, Nora Carlton, slightly mirroring your career. My favorite character in the books, and this is the third in the series, Benny Dugan, the legendary investigator. Was there a real-world inspiration for Benny?
Yes. Which again makes it easy for me to write Benny, because I close my eyes and I picture an enormous Brooklyn accented investigator that I worked with for years on mob cases, who unfortunately died from melanoma way too early in 2006, named Kenny McCabe. And he was an extraordinary figure, someone out of fiction, 6'5", 250-pound, booming voice. He would call me Mr. Smooth. That's the way he spoke. And I called him Mr. Rough, because his was a nod to me, in his view, being good on my feet. Mine was a nod to him being rough. And I loved that man, and he was the best there ever was. And so I close my eyes and I try to hear Kenny and see him when I write Benny Dugan.
Listen, I think Jim now has to be Mr. Smooth forever, man. I mean, that's immortal. Can we use that now?
Just don't use it in my presence.
Mr. Smooth.
Mr. Smooth.
Why were you moved to write about right-wing extremism as related to podcasts and how people follow their every word?
I was trying to think of topics, as I do with all these books, that will be interesting to readers, that were things that I wrestled with that posed difficult legal, factual challenges to investigators and prosecutors. And this is obviously front of mind because we have a significant problem in this country with domestic terrorism, especially white identity extremism. That is, people with a warped view of their identity as Caucasian, believing they're under threat in some way they need to respond to violently. We've seen a lot of that, and a lot of voices encouraging that and channeling that. And so my thought was, well, that's a really hard question. When does speech become crime? And so I could write about it in a way that'd be interesting. I hope not depressing to readers, but interesting to them.
So, Jim, it's really hard not to address the elephant in the room, and that is, I mean, you're writing fiction, but this is our real world reality. So how concerned are you about the proliferation of right-wing podcasters who are often untethered from reality and facts and do drum up fear and outrage?
Very concerned. And if I were still in the FBI, it would be front of mind, because the internet offers people interested in radicalizing, offers demagogues an opportunity to whisper in the ear of troubled people in a way that just wasn't possible 20 years ago. I first grappled with this in probably about 2014 when I was FBI director, and the so-called Islamic State was trying to reach troubled, in that case, almost all young men in the United States who were seeking meaning in their lives, and whisper to them, then mostly through Twitter, kill. Come to the so-called caliphate in Syria and kill with us, or if you can't travel, kill where you are, kill any non-believers. And when I say it, it seems nuts, but when you consume that as a troubled person every single day, over and over again, there's a devil on your shoulder whispering to you almost every waking hour. It can move people in ways that are really scary. And that phenomenon is really agnostic as to message. And so we've seen in the last 10 years the rise of a lot of voices on the right who can reach those same troubled people, be the same devil on the shoulder, saying, people are coming for you. White people are threatened. We need to stand up. We need to act. We need to take action against the woke mob that's trying to undercut that which is essentially American. Get out there and do something. And of course, that's all protected speech. But at some point, it can easily bleed over into moving those troubled souls to violence, to seek meaning through violence. And so it is at the heart of the FBI's domestic terrorism work today. I assume, I'm outside, but I assume it is. And we could see this coming even before January the 6th.
I want to be clear that not all conservative or right-wing podcasts fit that description. Not what we're saying. I mean, look, I've reposted a lot of things from Ben Shapiro lately, who is one of the smartest people on calling out tariffs for what they are, a tax increase on the American people, who just pointed out how corrupt Trump is on crypto and accepting a $400 million plane from Qatar. So there are responsible, conservative, influential right-wing podcasters. I'm curious, how would you describe your politics today? I mean, you were a lifelong Republican until 2016.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with what you just said, Dave, very much. This isn't about protected speech. We need diverse voices in our public square. That's awesome and has to be protected. The bad guy that started this book is someone who is well beyond that and is looking to get his followers, without him being accountable for it, but get them to do bad things against people he disfavors. That's a whole different thing. And so my politics are really centrist. I was always center right. I was an endangered species to begin with, I suppose. There were a fair number of Republicans in Connecticut who were like me, and so I was just right of center, sort of strong national security, probably left of center on social issues, and that creature does not exist in today's Republican Party. So I still think of myself as a centrist, and sometimes it's lonely in the center.
I'm with you in that lonely lane.
So, Jim, let's talk about the FBI. So Kash Patel is now the director. He famously had an enemies list that he went into the position with. I believe you're on it. And I don't think that's news to you. And I'm just wondering how that is showing up in your life.
Yeah, I think I'm on it. I don't know firsthand. I forget whether it's a children's book or whatever it is, but I didn't buy the current FBI director's books. So I don't know that for sure, but I've been told that. And so how do I think about it? This may sound weird coming from me, but I kind of feel sorry for the guy and his deputy, because they spent years barking a bunch of nonsense at their followers about the FBI. And then they caught the car, and now they have to drive the car. And it turns out that the FBI is not a corrupt leftist cabal. And so there's nothing in their lives that have prepared them to lead an organization that complex and that challenging. And their followers are all like, so wait a minute, we thought the FBI was corrupt. So it sounds odd, but I actually do think it must be incredibly difficult for those people, having caught the car, to now drive it. The Bureau will be okay in the long run. It's going to cause a lot of pain to individuals who already have been pushed out of positions and had their careers shortened. But in a way, the Bureau will revert to what it was a lot of the time during J. Edgar Hoover's reign. The work will be done at the field offices. They'll keep it away from headquarters. And then in 3 years, it will recover.
Per Allison's point, there was a report in the Washington Times that the FBI is investigating your, quote, infiltration of Donald Trump's campaign using 2 undercover honeypot agents from 2015. Have you caught wind of any of that? Do you have any comment about that?
Yeah, just a smile. I actually saw someone sent me a tweet by the current director, something I didn't do a lot of, saying that was nonsense, that the so-called honeypot thing there was nothing to it. And so that's consistent with my recollection.
I like your sanguine nature about this, Jim. It's sort of contagious. I like that you're not freaking out about it, because I mean, part of why I get concerned is when I find out that the department has fired prosecutors who worked on January 6th cases. So they did nothing other than prosecute
Doing their job.
violent people who tried to kill police officers.
Yeah.
And so now the Department of Justice has fired them. And so the idea that like things will just keep running, it worries. I mean, I think that they're changing so much of not only the ethos, just the day-to-day practices, that how can you be sure that things will keep running productively?
Yes, that's a really good point. Look, the way I think about threats, I've been threatened a lot in my life. And before there was an enemies list, I think I was on it, not to brag, but what I do with threats is 2 things that seem contradictory. First, be clear-eyed about the threat and take reasonable steps to protect yourself, the institutions you may lead, those sorts of things. But second, be careful not to exaggerate it. There's a tendency when you are confronted with a threat, especially if it's aimed at you, to make it the boogeyman under every bed. and to give it free space in your head that it doesn't deserve. And so I try to do those two things, be clear-eyed about it, but don't allow yourself to exaggerate a threat. So think about the threat to the Department of Justice, which includes the FBI. I don't mean to suggest there's not going to be real harm done, especially to individuals. And so that's real and that's painful and it's wrong. But I also know that you don't change culture by shouting at it. You don't change culture by punishing people. The FBI and the Department of Justice have long-standing cultures that at their core are committed to the rule of law and to apolitical law enforcement. And so there'll be a lot of pain and a lot of loss, but you don't have the time, if you're these characters, or the know-how to change culture in a fundamental way. And so these things are contradictory. I think there's a real problem. This is awful in the short term. In the long term, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay.
Do you talk to the rank and file? What's the morale like? There are reports that Kash Patel doesn't work very much, spends a lot of time clubbing, that he's missed most briefings at this point, and in some cases is spending time at UFC and NHL events as opposed to the massive amount of work that an FBI director requires.
Yes, that's great. And I hope that continues, because that's honestly, if you're a director who has no idea about the organization, has never led anything, or you're a deputy director who's never led anything and has no idea about the organization, it is best for the organization if the career people run it. So when I hear that the directors at UFC fights are spending all this time in Vegas, I'm like, better that than trying to run something you have no ability to run.
Interesting point of view.
I take his point.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, the less meddling somebody who doesn't know anything about a company can do, the better.
Huh. Again, it's his sanguine nature.
I agree. So here's something that also I think should raise our eyebrows, if not our pulse. The Justice Department has created a weaponization working group to weaponize basically the Department of Justice. I mean, their plan is to, quote, name and shame people that they can't charge with a crime. And we've already seen them doing this with some journalists. And it's Orwellian. I mean, it's Orwellian, and it's such a strange dystopian world that we're living in. Do you have any thoughts about what regular people can do, or what good law enforcement agents can do to fight back?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with the word Orwellian. The Trump administration is all about projection. We're going to fight something by being that thing. And so they're going to address weaponization by weaponizing. And it's just par for the course with these characters. I hope what people will do, first of all, good people, innocent people will be hurt by that. But doing that, shaming people for whom there's no basis for an accusation of crime, is a violation of a variety of Department of Justice policies and probably the law, the Privacy Act. And so I would hope people will avail themselves of the remedies available to them and sue for damages from these individuals if they are smeared in a way that violates something like the Privacy Act. And we'll see how long they continue the naming and shaming, if they're going to personally have to pay for what they've done to someone's reputation. But people just need to both, again, acknowledge the threat and be clear-eyed about it, but take steps to vindicate the rule of law, right? Challenge them. You mentioned the January 6 prosecutors who were fired or reassigned. A lot of them are challenging that through the court system, through our administrative remedies. Do it. Please do it. There's a really important role for lawyers to play here to vindicate the rule of law. Only one leg of our constitutional stool is still standing, and that is the judiciary. We do have an independent judiciary. And so people should make sure that they pursue the remedies that are available to them through that. If we get to a place where the Trump administration will no longer follow clear directives from the Supreme Court, we are totally screwed. And I don't know what we'll do then as a country, but we're not there yet. And so people should pursue their legal remedies, and the judiciary will hear them and vindicate their rights.
I'm sure you saw the interview the president did with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, where it appeared to at least suggests that he's not sure if he has to follow the Constitution. Do you think that moment is coming, and what can be done?
First of all, yeah, I saw that interview. I saw it in writing, and at first didn't believe it. A man who recited an oath that I think is like 30 words long, and at the center of it is his promise to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I thought, I can't be right, but I watched him say that. So I don't know what that's about. But I doubt that the Trump administration will go so far as to do what no president has ever done, which is defy the judgment of the Supreme Court in the case in which the court issues the judgment. And so I doubt it, because there's very few issues that unite Democrats, Republicans, and neithers in the United States, but that is one of them. I'm forgetting the polling, but something in the 80% of people say, no, administrations must follow directives from the Supreme Court. And so I doubt we'll get to that place, but we could. That we're even having this conversation is crazy. But I don't know what to do. If we ever got to that place where the Supreme Court said, do X, and President Trump said, no, I won't do X, I don't know what we do then, honestly.
What about the FBI agents who are, according to the New York Times, being asked to pursue illegal immigrants? Does that fall under their duties? Did you read that story? And what is an agent to do if that's what they're told by their authority?
I'm not sure what that meant. I think the FBI, by statute, can investigate crimes like illegal reentry after deportation. And so I think it's consistent with their legal authorities. But if it's not, no FBI agent ought to be doing it without being assured by their chief division counsel that this conduct is consistent with the law.
Jim, I know that 2016 and how the whole Hillary Clinton thing went down is a sore spot for so many people, and certainly Hillary Clinton and Democrats. When you look at what's happening now with Trump, everything that we've just discussed, how often does your mind go back to 2016 and what could have been different?
It goes back fairly often when people ask me about it. So I understand you asking about it, and that's no problem. I've thought about this 1,000 times probably, that I still hate the fact, which I felt at the time, that we were involved. I still think we made the best of bad alternatives. We chose the best of bad alternatives. And I'm no political scientist, but I see 3 presidential elections in a row where the late deciding voters broke heavily for Donald Trump, and I was in my pajamas for the last 2. And so I have serious doubts whether the FBI had any impact on the election, but it doesn't change how I think about it. It sucked, and we had to choose between 2 doors, and we chose the least bad one. And I'm still comfortable with that decision, although I regret deeply being involved.
I'm sure you saw when Hillary was asked about this right before the election in October, if she thought Kamala Harris had a good chance to win the election. And she said, quote, "I don't think she has Jim Comey waiting in the wings to kneecap her. So that's good." What was your reaction to that? And if you bumped into Hillary at Viva Zapata the next time you're here in Westport and you guys just happen upon a bar stool next to each other, what would you say to her?
I don't know. I mean, I've never met Secretary Clinton, but I don't know. I mean, I understand the pain she must feel. I get the need to externalize, to find a focus for pain and loss. So I don't know. I mean, it's mostly empathy. Doesn't change how I think about it. And I would wish her well. And I would hope she could take a step back and realize that nothing that we were doing that was designed to try and hurt Hillary Clinton or hurt or help Donald Trump. We hated being involved in it. And part of me would say over the margarita, like, really, it's my fault that 400,000 of your emails were on Anthony Weiner's laptop and we learned about it in late October? That's my fault? But it would probably take a couple of margs before I would get that loose.
I forgot about Anthony Weiner's laptop.
I forgot about Anthony Weiner entirely.
I forgot Anthony Weiner.
Solid blast from the past there.
That was a shout out. There's been so many laptops since then.
Yes, there has.
Well, and that's what prompted our whole need to decide in late October. Do we say something about that we've reopened to look at these hundreds of thousands of emails when we only ever found, I forget the number, but thousands? Or do we conceal that, having told the country the investigation was over? And so which do we do? And both of those choices suck, as I said. But I think we chose the least of the two sucky options.
I'm curious your thoughts on, I don't know any other way to put this. Well, as Senator Blumenthal told us in person last week, the greatest scandal in American political history is going on, and very few people are talking about it, which is the Trump family's business with the crypto industry. The president's family has already made some $300 million from transaction fees alone, and most that I've spoken to believe they'll make north of $1 billion. On top of that, there's the access to foreign leaders, foreign governments,
Foreign money.
and foreign money that is untraceable. We have no idea who he's selling access to. On top of the $400 million airplane from Qatar, who supports Hamas, a former FBI director. What do you make of all this? And what should Democrats do?
Yeah, first of all, maybe I disagree a little bit with part of your premise. I do think that outlets like the New York Times have done a good job of covering this and writing about it. There's a danger that we're not talking about it enough because we're just numb. And look, even part of my reaction is, look, there's a reason that his attorney general in Trump 1.0, his chief of staff, his national security advisor, his secretary of defense told the American people this guy should never be allowed near the Oval Office again. How much warning does the American public need? You knew this was going to happen. And so that's part of I think, what suppresses a lot of our conversation, which is we look at this and say, of course the guy's a criminal, right? We've been talking about this forever. But I think what we should do, if you're an investigator, is document, even if your superiors tell you we're not going to investigate any of this conduct, put it all in Sentinel, which is the FBI's database, follow the rules, the Domestic Investigations and Operations Guide, and document what your sources tell you, document what you obtain from witnesses, from cooperating witnesses, from liaison services. Put it all in the system, even if you're told you can't look at it, because there will be accountability. It'll be difficult to hold the president accountable, given the scope of his immunity, but nobody around the president has any kind of immunity.
That immunity ruling changed American history. But as a former Republican, and as a former Republican myself, what I struggle with is I thought Hunter Biden deserved attention. I thought there were some shady dealings that deserved, outrage. How do those same people look the other way on corruption 1,000 times that scale?
Oh, because they are who they are. But the people in government positions to do something about it are, in the main, Trump's personal attorneys. And the Republican Party itself is still in the grips of the cult. And so at some point, his approval ratings will dip to a point where Republicans who should and fear that the midterm elections loosen a little bit. But really, the best hope for the country is a change in control of one of the two houses of Congress in 2026, which is what saved us in a lot of ways in 2018. And so Trump and the people around him really have another year and a half of this kind of completely unrestricted freedom of motion before the American people change that, God willing.
It's a long time, Jim. It's a long time. Jim, how do you think, given that you've had to think back to 2016 a lot, how do you think we got here today? How do you think we got to this point where you say that the American, all of Trump's 1.0 cabinet or whatever advisors tried to tell the American public? How do you explain where we are today?
Again, I have a view. I'm not sure how much weight people should put on it, but I see it as a perfect storm. 16 was a perfect storm of a unique cultural figure, Donald Trump. We have NBC to thank for creating this unique cultural figure through The Apprentice, who was present in the minds of a lot of people. I heard someone say he became the poor person's idea of a rich person. And so he was cemented into our minds as a country. And then he faced a historically unpopular candidate in Secretary Clinton, and in a country where he was touching on themes that resonated with a lot of people, because we are changing tremendously Right? We've lost so much that was centering in the United States. Our faith, our families, our communities, our sense of who we are. There's a lot of people feeling insecure as a result of that, for reasons that I get. That was the perfect storm that produced 16. And if you, I'm sure Secretary Clinton, if she were on our podcast, she would say the FBI decision. I don't think so, but maybe there was a conglomeration of extraordinary events that came together. And then what happened? The next thing that happened was a similar set, right? Joe Biden and the people close to him concealed from the American people his failing as a man in his 80s and put us in a position where, again, in a storm of uncertainty, of psychic hangover from the pandemic, a man who was clearly unfit to be president was facing this cultural icon in Donald Trump. And you know the rest of the story, but that extraordinary collection of events produced Donald Trump's victory. I think he's a unique figure, and I don't see a future for the MAGA movement if Donald Trump leaves office, and I'm counting on the fact that he will leave office in 3 years. But I think it's that we are a country in turbulence and change, and we were met with circumstances that if you wrote them in your next novel, your editor would strike them as preposterous.
Real quick, we want to get your dose of sanity, but before we get to that, you write about these real world things happening via fiction. Would you ever write a Trump-based novel, or is it just so unbelievable that it might not even sell in fiction?
Yeah, that's what I think it would be crazy, right? Imagine I wrote a scene where, okay, here's what we're going to have happen. The Secretary of Defense is going to be on a chat with all the key leaders of our national security apparatus, and they're going to accidentally invite the editor of a media outlet to be on the chat. And then they're going to share the attack timelines and the weapons release timelines and the tools in that chat. Your editor would go, just stop. And so we are living in a world that's in some ways depressingly beyond fiction.
Yeah, and on top of that, that defense secretary is a former cable news guy. I mean, so are we, but we're not the defense secretary
Yet.
either.
Right? Get your resume.
Well, believe me. Yeah. All right. So Jim, we ask all of our guests here on Sanity for their dose of sanity, what you do every day to stay sane in these maddening times.
Two things that are probably contradictory. I do yoga every morning with my spouse, and then I have at least one glass of wine, or if I'm lucky to be with Dave, I have a margarita at the end of the day. And then probably, can I throw, you said one. And then I play a lot. I play a lot with my grandchildren. They are my source of optimism for our world and our country. And so that's a big part of it.
Play what?
All whatever they want Pop to play. My wife and I watch 3 of our little kids, 3 days a week. And so I play chalk bombs in the driveway. I play, let's explore in the woods and step in creeks and get wet in a way that Nana won't like. I do whatever they want to do.
That's fantastic.
That's beautiful.
Wine and Yoga might be the title of your last book.
Yeah, of your memoir. Wine and yoga. I like that. And by the way, I don't see them as contradictory. In fact, I think they can only help each other. Yeah.
Wine during yoga?
Why not?
Now you're talking.
It's hard to do a downward dog.
Got to get a straw. Get a straw.
Yoga is a really important thing as a part of my ritual. Jim, it's been a great interview. If you could hold up the book, because I have Westport here. Now, I recommend that everyone start with the first of these novels, which is Central Park West, and then go Westport, and then go FDR Drive, which is in bookstores now, on Amazon now. But if you have to start with the third, you're fine, right?
Yeah, you might as well. You don't have to. I write them so that you don't have to, but I also write them so that once you read one, you're going to want to go back and read the others.
You will, because you will fall for Nora and for Benny, and you get I don't read real fast. I flew through Westport because I love beach reads, but this is much more sophisticated. I can't read my wife's, somewhat trashy. This is sophisticated and real world and intriguing, and it is a perfect summer beach read.
I can't wait to read it.
That's great. Well, I hope you have fun.
Thank you, Jim.
All right,
Appreciate
Jim, great
the time.
to talk to you.
Great to be with you. See you again.